All right. Joining me now, Breitbart's Pentagon Correspondent Kristina Wong. Thank you so much for joining me on the Alec Show.
Thanks for having me on, Alec.
Well, obviously, this is a breaking news story. This was a gift given to the left-wing liberal media here. They are all over this. President Donald Trump yesterday said he didn't know anything about it. Today, now, obviously, it's confirmed that this thing was a legit leaked information to this radical journalist over at the Atlantic. And Trump says today he still has confidence in Mike Waltz. So what is the word on the street there at the Pentagon? What do you have? What's the latest on the story here?
Well, as you know, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he is in Asia right now. He's probably very thankful for that. Um, I mean, it is a talk of the Pentagon. It's a talk of the town. Everyone in DC is talking about it. I actually landed at the Dulles Airport yesterday and just heard random strangers who don't even look like they work in national security talking about it. And this guy said, "Oh, did you hear Pete Hegseth texted war plans to a group chat? What an idiot!" And his companions are like, "Oh, who's Pete Hegseth? What is this group chat?" So the news has sort of circulated in circles around the Beltway, and that's unfortunate. It was a mistake. But Trump sets the agenda, and he said that he still has confidence in Waltz. And so I don't think there's going to be any firing, but of course, this is exactly what everyone loves to talk about. And Democrats are smelling blood in the water. They're really aggrieved over things like DOGE, the firing of federal workers, probationary workers, the deportations, everything. And what they're trying to do is seize this moment to channel all their anger about the Trump administration and try to use this. And I don't think it's going to stick outside of DC. I don't know what you think, but I mean, it makes for a lot of juicy gossip. I mean, this is the exact kind of story that could fuel, gossip and talk for days. Hopefully not after that. In the end, the strikes went off without a hitch. They will continue, and that's the most important thing is that operationally everything went fine. But this controversy probably isn't going to go away.
Yeah, and to your point there too, yes, the strikes were successful. Nothing was compromised in that sense. But the questions, like I think that most people have, is number one is why in the world with this activist? Because I don't really even consider the guy a journalist. I think he's an activist because he's only out there to undermine President Donald Trump with everything that he does. How in the world would that guy get added to this Signal chat? And then that also leads to the question is why are they using a Signal chat to actually discuss any type of military operation whatsoever? Those 2 points, I think, are really the questions that I have. I think that most people have is how do you invite this guy? Now there was staffers also. I know there was 18 people supposedly in this chat. Some of them staffers. Is this a possible a leak or a mole in the White House somewhere that added this guy on purpose? That part of it is very hard to understand. So those 2 points. What's your take on that? Why he was added to the chat and why are they using Signal?
Okay, yeah. I mean, when I first saw the story, read the story, my reaction was like everyone else's, like, how could this have happened? And what worse of a person could you add to a group chat? Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of the Atlantic magazine. I mean, the Atlantic magazine it's an anti-Trump magazine. They've published some of the biggest anti-Trump stories. They are responsible for the suckers and losers hoax. The Trump supposedly said that American troops killed in World War II were suckers and losers. That was a huge and damaging. Well, I wouldn't say damaging because at the end of the day, it's questionable whether it was true or not. But the left used that over and over again ad nauseum during the whole last election cycle and even before then. I mean, what worse person could you add to a group chat inadvertently, right? So that to me was the hugest, question of, but I mean, if you think about it, how could this have happened? So I don't know if you've used Signal or who, how common that is, but what happens is if you have people in your contacts and then you download Signal, you can add those people. Those contacts can be added to Signal, and sometimes I think automatically. So I get notified every single time one of my contacts joins Signal, and so what had happened apparently is that this journalist Jeffrey Goldberg got this connection request from Mike Waltz, and that means that Mike Waltz had Jeffrey Goldberg in his contacts at the very least.
Wow.
And that does look very sketchy, but we have to, remember that Mike Waltz was a former congressperson. And frankly, a lot of Congress people have journalists' numbers. They're on a texting relationship. That's sort of I wouldn't say rite of passage, but when you first come to DC as a reporter and you're starting to, get these contacts and establish yourself, to get a congressman's number is like a big deal. And so most reporters, I think, in DC who've been here for a while have a lot of members of Congress's contacts in their phone. So, I've got Matt Gaetz, I mean, he's no longer a congressperson. Nancy Mace, I've texted with her before. Mike Waltz, it was actually a friend of a friend. So I had his number for years, right? And so why he was talking to Jeffrey Goldberg, I don't know. But Jeffrey Goldberg, he's he's an editor. He's reporting national security. This is Mike Waltz's area. He was on the House Armed Services Committee. So I'm sure along the way over the last 10 years, they've interacted, they've texted. However, the story does reveal, if you know how Signal works, that they had never texted on Signal before. So that's a good thing, right? Because you don't get a request to connect if you have already started chatting. So that's something that Goldberg revealed, is that they don't text regularly via Signal. So some people are saying, oh, Mike Waltz has been leaking to Jeffrey Goldberg. Well, maybe if he had, it hadn't been on Signal. Not to mention Goldberg hasn't reported anything since October 2024, so before the Trump administration has come in. But what's clear is that Waltz's enemies, Trump's enemies, are going to use this and try. I mean, Waltz may have enemies within the administration, in fact. And so they're going to use this to try to hurt him, maybe not get him fired this time, but try to sideline him or hurt him or question his expertise. And Mike Waltz is someone who is very dangerous to the establishment. He was previously a member of the establishment, I would say, years ago when he was just establishing his career. He was pretty hawkish, and I mean, was Marco Rubio. And so these people have sort of learned over the last decade or so, and now aligned with President Trump. So that's my speculation on how Waltz and Goldberg first got in contact. And I mean, that is a huge breach. I mean, why couldn't they have added someone like me, right?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you that, Kristina, because I'm curious. Yeah. You're there at the Pentagon. You're with Breitbart. You're their correspondent. What do you do as a journalist if you get inadvertently added to a freaking National Security Council chat? I mean, how would you handle it as a journalist? What do you do?
Well, I would say, like, honestly, to be part of that is a dream, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? As a reporter, to have that insight, I mean, this is like what Bob Woodward claims to know. This is what he finds out after the fact by talking to people, right? These deliberations, these national security deliberations. So, I mean, that's just fascinating, right? So, yeah, I would linger around. I'd linger around for a while. However, I have, my ethics and integrity would not, allow me to just run out and start, tweeting or reporting or sharing the details of this without letting people know that, hey guys, did you mean to add me by mistake? I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably reach out to Mike Waltz and I'd say, hey, by the way, I've been on this group chat, and that's just me as a human being, and then if I wanted to report something, I would probably work with him. I'd probably say, hey, look, I know all this stuff. I'd like to report some of that. What can I report? And, we still don't know if there was actual classified details in the group chat. And Goldberg sort of glosses over this. He says sensitive, operational, whatever, but we don't know exactly what was said. As journalists, we are trusted with a lot of information all the time. For instance, the potential serious strikes during the Obama administration, we were told, hey, something's going to happen this afternoon. Don't go too far. Stay within an hour of the Pentagon. Sometimes we get a heads up beforehand saying, there will be strikes. This will be the, platforms used. And they trust us to not run out and tweet this. Or I'll give you another example. I was traveling with Secretary Pompeo to Iraq, and we landed in Iraq, the reporters and with Secretary Pompeo, and we don't tweet that we're in Iraq. Even though that's big news, we don't say, "Hey, everyone, Secretary Pompeo just landed," because there is this sort of collaboration. And as a national security reporter, you have to build that trust. Otherwise, they're not going to let me on the plane, right? And it's not just Breitbart. They'll invite AP, and this is sort of just the way Washington works, and. So I forgot your question.
Well, just saying how you would handle if you got that, if you were added to the Signal chat, but just to your point here too. Now Mike Waltz obviously is going to be under the gun much more than his predecessor Jake Sullivan was, because he could do no wrong. Same thing with Lloyd Austin, right? And Pete Hegseth is held to a much higher standard here than Lloyd Austin. He was asleep at the wheel, missing 5 days. No one even cared about it, right? But they're calling for Pete Hegseth to step down, and this literally had nothing to do with him. But the other big question here is, was there any war plans discussed? Was there any classified information that was actually discussed that would have given up or compromised the security of the operation with the Houthis? That still seems to be, as far as we know right now, there was a nothing burger in the case of actual classified information. It is still just as alarming that they were even discussing this on an app that's open like that with this Signal, because I wouldn't trust any. I would imagine it's open where China could hack something like that, or Russia could hack something like that. So I wouldn't trust any of these apps on our phones.
Yeah, and that was to your second point. Why are they doing this over Signal? I mean, I guess you could argue everyone communicates by group chat, Signal. A lot of troops do actually nowadays. I mean, not anything operationally sensitive. As far as I know, they probably do actually talk about operationally sensitive information. But nowadays, everyone in any kind of organization has some sort of group chat going on. And Signal is pretty secure. However, if your phone gets stolen or the messages in Signal are stored, then the person who steals your phone could gain access to those chats. So yes, that is a security risk, and I'm definitely not a information security expert, but I try my best. If I'm going to, I went into Pakistan, I didn't bring my phone, I didn't turn on my phone. If I'm going somewhere like the Chinese embassy, which I haven't for many, 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 many years, probably over 10 years, I wouldn't, bring my phone. I've been to the Russian embassy. I leave my phone off or outside. So you have to take precautions. And so to have a Signal or any kind of group chat talking about something this sensitive, I think is kind of shocking on its face. But then again, I mean, there's a lot that I don't know. I don't know. I personally text with the security officials from different security agencies over Signal. And so far it's been secure and nothing's been compromised. I also do it via Twitter, which isn't a very good idea because that can easily be compromised. But I also don't make sure I talk about anything sensitive that could hurt myself or other people, sometimes maybe embarrassing. So we still don't know how what exactly was compromised. And I'm sure that among these people you have Tulsi Gabbard, John Ratcliffe. I'm sure if there was truly something wrong, someone would have said, hey, let's not talk about this via Signal. So that makes me think that nothing classified or sensitive was actually discussed. And Goldberg never says classified information was discussed. And of course, as we talked about, it's in his interest to make the Trump administration look as bad as possible, and also get some kind of a scalp, especially when it comes to Hegseth. So, I mean, a lot of the targeting has been on Hegseth, I think, because the Pentagon's got a massive budget. He wants to implement a lot of changes. So he is a top target, and maybe they think he's the easy pick because he's always been controversial. People like talking about him. He's very high profile, unapologetic, and so they're going after him, but we don't know what was said, whether there or not there are war plans. I mean, war plans is such a vague description that could mean
Right.
anything. So I think when he says there were no war plans discussed, he's also very good orator. So I don't know if he's also like maybe something was actually discussed. Apparently the timing and the weapons used and the targets or whatever. But maybe he's sort of interpreting war plans in his own way, and it's kind of a loose term. So I think we don't actually know what was discussed, and I think either for myself or some other enterprising reporter. I mean, the administration probably wants this to go away, but I think what you could do is try to get the actual what was actually texted, so that we have some kind of clarity and see, okay, was this actually classified? But then, if it was, then you wouldn't be able to share that,
Right,
with
because then
anyone.
you're in
So,
trouble for sharing classified information. Yeah.
right.
Well, the press secretary
Yeah,
backed it up today, saying that there were no war plans discussed, no classified material was sent to the thread. So if she's saying that, knowing that this guy has the whole thread on his snapshots of it, I would imagine she's telling the truth because she knows that he has the information now. So I would assume, and again, war plans. It's a strategic word that you have to, like, I had to use now in the caption, like, oh, war plans, because that's the trending cycle that's going
right,
on now. So it's like everyone now is jumping on that because that's the parroted word. That's the key word here. That's going to boost your SEO whenever you're trying to report on the story. So you got to throw war plans in there. And that's part of this strategic strategy. I think they know that. And so that's a big part of how they're going to play this. And like you said at the top, they smell the blood in the water. They're only in there and it couldn't have been a worse guy to have this happen to. And
right.
that's what's really mind-boggling about it all. And I know Mike Waltz. I've done several interviews with him. I don't have his contact, but I got his right-hand man's contact there. I was excited to see him get the job. I think he's a good person for the position, but there's no other way to try to shade this. If this was the Biden administration, I'd be on this too, saying this was a blunder. I don't know how this would be like, Jake Sullivan inviting Sean Hannity into the chat room or something like that, right? And you would say, wow, what a big mistake this was. So it's not to say that this was not a mistake, but so
Yeah.
this was a problem here.
Yeah, no, yeah, you bring up just so many good points. Like you said, if Pete Hegseth says no war plans were discussed, I think he'd be probably pretty confident in saying that and having there not be any war plans discussed, because, like you said, Jeffrey Goldberg at the end of the day has the group chat, and so he could easily get Hegseth fired easily if Hegseth was lying, and I'm sure he knows that. So he's telling the truth. I think he's telling the truth. But we still don't know what the war plans mean. But you're also right about the term war plans. That's the hot new word right now, and we saw that last week when Elon Musk went over to the Pentagon. So the big headline from the New York Times was, Elon Musk to be briefed on China war plans, and what does that mean? So the Joint Staff has a set of plans for different contingencies that get updated all the time, and that's what the Pentagon means when they say we're a planning organization, because they have plans. They don't want to start from scratch. They have options of what they could do that you could always present and pull up or whatever. And so when you say war plans, I mean, for the Pentagon, that's quite mundane, and it could, it's not that anyone's planning to invade China or whatever, but that's what the media is using right now to gin up controversy and attention, clickbait, SEO optimization, like you
Yeah.
said. So yeah, and it's also short too. Speaking of SEO, because you have to fit like the headline into the little box, right?
We all struggle with that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So this is a made for I wouldn't say TV necessarily, because you just have the little text box, that's not exciting. But then you've got Hegseth, you've got Waltz and
You
whatever.
had the
There's
vice president in on the chat as well. I mean, this was, all the heavy
yeah,
hitters involved in that. You had Steve
yeah.
Miller apparently involved. Tulsi Gabbard is in the chat. I mean, this for this guy, this thing fell into his lap. He must have been like, he must have thought, it was his
It's a
birthday there. I
jackpot.
mean, yeah, Jack, that's a home run for that guy. And then it was gifted to him. So it's mind
Yeah.
boggling. I wanted to ask you too, Kristina, before I get you out of here. You had the story too that Pete Hegseth is still trying to figure out who the leaker is at the Pentagon that leaked this story and I thought it was a great point by you because it's like no one seems to care about that's going on here. There's a problem here. Like that story with Elon Musk was leaked somehow out of the Pentagon, and Pete Hegseth's trying to find out any update on that or what's the story there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge story. So the Elon Musk was going to the Pentagon. I mean, that in itself isn't very sensitive, but what the report went over detailed, who was potentially giving a briefing, what was possibly on the agenda, if any of that is true. Those are very sensitive details, where the meeting was supposedly. So we don't know how much of it is BS because the New York Times reported that the meeting would take place in the tank, and that's where all the military commanders and senior leaders meet to have a very secure room to discuss the most sensitive, secure matters. The meeting happened in Pete's office, so I'm not sure if they changed the location or whatever, or if the story just was wrong. But that's very sensitive. These things are sensitive, and it just shows the level of access for whoever the leaker is. But there was also another recent leak that was reported by NBC and CNN, so two top anti-Trump outlets. It was an interim defense guidance document, a memo that was signed by Pete Hegseth, just outlining, what his priorities are, and that's in advance of a defense strategic guidance that the administration would put out. And so NBC reported on it. I asked for that document and they said, I'm sorry, we can't give it to you. It's classified. So that classified information is being shared. That's getting out to the Trump administration's enemies for political reasons. That can be read by China, that can be read by Russia or whatever, or who our enemies are, that the left proclaims to care, so much about OPSEC and our enemies getting information and all that stuff. So whoever's a leaker is very high up, has access to classified secure information, memos from Pete Hegseth. And that's not good because, it's just 2-3 months into the administration, there's lots more to be done. And so if there's a leaker at the very top levels of the Pentagon, and there's some speculation online, and, I've had with some officials as to who it might be, I mean, this is not good. This person needs to be caught immediately. And so Hegseth, he has launched an investigation. It will include polygraphs. Let's hope this leaker actually does get caught and just doesn't go, the road of many congressional investigations where we never find out. Hopefully we will find out who this is, whether it's a general, whether it's a lower level staffer. This person clearly means to hurt this administration. And I think because they're just undertaking so much change, they are completely kicking over the hornet's nest in Washington, D.C. They are actually draining the swamp. And so there's just so many people who are going to seize on every little thing, leak everything they can. I personally was wondering, okay, when is the resistance going to start? When is the mainstream media going to fight back? Because everyone was sort of on their backs for the first month, like, oh my God, this is happening. And I couldn't believe it either. I mean, things were happening every single day. There was this, kind of honeymoon period. But now I think the left is trying to claw their way back, and they're going to use, of course, the media and leakers and unintentional leaks like this, unfortunately, by the administration to do it. So I think we have to strap in here because it's going to get a lot more dicey.
Yeah, not only do we have to worry about enemies abroad, but we have to worry about the enemies that are here, and it's we have got a lot of them, and the Trump administration knows that, and so that's why they got to keep their guard up. They left their chin uncovered with this one and got smacked. I'm sure they're going to learn a lot of lessons from it, and they'll improve. I love all the reporting you do over there at Breitbart. Anything other than this story? What else are you working on over there that we can look forward to this week? You working on any stories over there?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on with the border. The administration just sent a second destroyer, or sending a second destroyer. Of course, there's the Houthi strikes going on. We just had the Secretary of the Navy confirmed. We still need a Secretary of the Air Force, coming up. So I think I'll be tracking all these developments. Appointees to the Pentagon are trickling in very, very slowly but surely. But there's just so much more to cover on this. What Doge is going to do, I think everyone's waiting to see the benefits. What Doge will reap. So, I mean, it's really exciting. 580. I think $1 million was cut just in the stroke of a pen last week. So that's really good. Let's see if we can get some actual fiscal sanity and bring it to Washington and drain the swamp.
Well, I love what you do over there. I always look forward to your reporting. I got the link to your Twitter account down there so my listeners can go over there and check you out. I really appreciate you giving me your time on this. Keep up the good work. Kristina Wong, thank you so much for joining me on the Alec Show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.